Days before my birthday, I already had a sinking feeling my sister would come up with some excuse to make my parents cancel the celebration. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It had become a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. So when they chose to go to her again, I made a choice of my own. I left for good. They broke me. My own family, on the eve of my birthday, meticulously dismantled every last shred of hope I had for belonging. But what they believed would leave me shattered and alone, instead forged the path to my true freedom. The fluorescent hum of the grocery store faded as I stepped into the oppressive silence of our living room. Evening shadows stretched long across the faded floral carpet, amplifying the tension thick enough to taste, as if the air itself was holding its breath. In my hand, a $6 chocolate cake from the bakery. Happy birthday, Liam, smeared in melting blue frosting. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My mother, Evelyn, and my father, Robert, sat on the couch opposite my sister, Olivia. It looked less like a family gathering and more like an ambush. The moment I walked in, Evelyn's gaze landed on me, an expression I knew too well, not pity, but a sort of practiced disappointment.
She didn't hesitate.
Liam, we've decided there won't be any birthday celebration this year. Olivia's been feeling overshadowed lately and needs the family's full attention right now. You understand. It wasn't a question, but a cold, final decree. My feelings, my existence, were background noise. Olivia, perched on the worn leather, looked appropriately distressed, her eyes already glistening with fake tears.
And that was it.
That was the moment. The final, crushing realization that this wasn't just another instance of being invisible. This was the last straw in a lifetime of being erased. I set the pathetic cake down on the coffee table. Didn't say a word. Just walked straight to my room. Inside, a quiet, furious resolve bloomed. It all made perfect, suffocating sense. Every slight, every sacrifice, every ignored achievement from the last 2 decades. Let me rewind, because to truly understand that moment, you need to understand the warped foundation of my family. Olivia is 2 years younger than me. When she was 8, she won a junior beauty pageant. One of those small, regional things that desperate parents convince themselves is the pinnacle of human achievement. I remember that day clearly, because it was the last time Evelyn and Robert looked at me with genuine pride. The instant they handed Olivia that cheap plastic trophy, everything changed. From that moment on, every family event, every saved dollar, every drop of parental attention was siphoned directly into Olivia's endless pageants, dance classes, voice lessons, acting coaches. Our house transformed into a shrine to her mediocre talents. My straight-A report cards got brief, dismissive nods. Olivia's participation ribbons were framed and mounted on every available wall. When I got accepted to the state science fair for a project I'd poured months into, my achievement vanished beneath the frenzy of Olivia's next competition. I learned to celebrate my small victories alone in my room, while the living room became Olivia's personal stage. Robert started working brutal overtime at the factory just to fund Olivia's expensive competition dresses and travel. He'd come home looking utterly destroyed, eat dinner in silence, then sit through hours of Olivia practicing her routines. I watched him age a decade in 3 years, his shoulders permanently slumped from the weight of financial pressure and emotional exhaustion. The only person who saw through the madness was my grandfather, Arthur, Robert's father, who lived across town. The family rarely talked about Arthur. He and Evelyn had some ancient feud about him refusing to financially support Olivia's pageant dreams. Smart man. But Arthur would secretly meet me at the library or the park, bringing sandwiches and actually listening when I talked about school, my part-time job at the hardware store, my college plans. He was the one who celebrated when I got accepted to state college with a partial scholarship. He even opened a small college fund for me without telling anyone, making deposits whenever he could. Arthur was my silent guardian, the only one who saw me. What made that birthday night even worse was what I'd overheard just 3 hours earlier. I'd come home early from my shift and heard Olivia on the phone in her room. Her door was cracked open, and her voice had that fake, sickly sweet tone she used when spinning elaborate lies to her friends. "Yeah, I already told Mom that I need extra attention right now," Olivia giggled. I mean, Liam's birthday is tomorrow, but who cares? I told them I've been feeling really depressed and overlooked. Mom bought it completely. She's going to tell him tonight that we're not celebrating because I need family support. I stood frozen in the hallway as she continued, her voice dripping with cruel amusement. The best part is that nobody knows I flunked out of college 3 weeks ago. That dismissal letter from the registrar is going to arrive any day now. But by then, I'll have convinced them that I dropped out because I was too stressed from the family focusing on Liam instead of me. Can you believe he still lives here at 23? What a loser. She laughed, that hateful, mocking sound I'd heard 1,000 times before. I already have Mom convinced that we need to spend Liam's birthday talking about my feelings and my future. By the time that letter arrives, they'll be so worried about my mental health that they won't even care about the $40,000 they wasted on my tuition. $40,000. They told me they couldn't help with my college expenses because money was tight. But they'd spent $40,000 on Olivia's education that she'd just thrown away. Something inside me, something that had been cracking for years, finally shattered completely in that hallway. So, when I walked in 3 hours later with that pathetic store-bought cake and saw them all sitting there, ready to cancel my birthday for Olivia's manufactured crisis, I knew exactly what was happening. She'd orchestrated this entire deflection, using my special day as a smokescreen to preempt her academic failure and position herself as the victim before the truth could surface. Evelyn leaned forward, hands clasped, in that practiced way she had when delivering what she believed was profound motherly wisdom. Liam, you need to understand that Olivia is going through a very difficult time right now. She's been feeling like the family doesn't appreciate her enough, and we need to show her that she's our priority. Your birthday happens every year, but Olivia's emotional well-being is fragile. We need to come together as a family and support her. That means no celebration, no cake, no presents. We're going to spend the evening talking about Olivia's feelings and how we can better support her dreams. I looked at Robert, hoping for some sign of resistance, some flicker of awareness that this was wrong. But he just stared at his hands, defeated as always. He'd given up fighting years ago, choosing survival over confrontation. Olivia finally spoke, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion.
I'm sorry, Liam.
I know this is hard for you, but I just feel so invisible sometimes, like nobody sees how much I'm struggling. I need to know that this family cares about me, that I'm not just forgotten. Forgotten, she actually said that word. The girl whose face covered every wall, whose trophies filled every shelf, whose needs dictated every family decision. She felt forgotten. Meanwhile, I'd been sleeping in the same tiny bedroom since I was 5 because Olivia needed the bigger room for her pageant costumes. I'd worn the same 3 pairs of jeans for 2 years because Olivia needed new outfits for Instagram photos. I'd been forgotten so thoroughly that most extended family members couldn't even remember what I was studying in college. That's when I made my decision. No announcement. No dramatic confrontation. No begging for recognition. I simply set that sad little cake on the coffee table, looked at each of them one last time, and walked to my room. They probably thought I was going to sulk like I had so many times before. They had no idea I was about to disappear from their lives completely. I moved through my room with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been planning this escape subconsciously for years. Every drawer got emptied. Every important document gathered. Every piece of clothing I actually cared about folded into 2 large duffel bags and a backpack. The room looked strange as I packed, like it was finally revealing what it had always been. A temporary stop, not a home. My entire life fit into 3 bags. That's what 23 years in that house amounted to. 3 bags and a college acceptance letter. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Robert knocked softly on my door. Liam, can I come in? I opened the door. He stood there, looking older than his 48 years, shoulders hunched, eyes tired. For a moment, a foolish part of me thought he'd come to his senses, that he was finally going to stand up for me. Instead, he pulled out his wallet and handed me 5 crumpled $100 bills. This is all I have right now, he said quietly. I know things aren't fair. I know we failed you, but I don't know how to fix it anymore. Your mother, Olivia? I just don't have any fight left. I took the money, not because I thought it made things right, but because I knew I'd need it. $500 was more than he'd ever given me for anything. The fact that it came with an apology for my entire childhood somehow made it worse. Thanks, I said flatly. Where will you go? Does it matter? He looked like I'd slapped him, but he didn't argue. Just nodded and walked away. Shoulders somehow more slumped than before. I left at 2 a.m. while everyone was asleep. Threw my bags in my beat-up Honda Civic that had 187,000 miles on it and drove to the one place I knew I'd be welcome. Grandpa Arthur's small house across town. Arthur opened the door in his bathrobe, took one look at my bags and my face, and just stepped aside to let me in without questions. That's the thing about Arthur. He didn't need explanations. He understood instantly. Birthday went well, I take it, he said dryly, heading to the kitchen to make hot chocolate. I told him everything. The conversation I'd overheard. The canceled celebration. The $500 from Robert. Arthur listened without interrupting, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug, jaw working like he was physically restraining himself from saying what he really thought. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You can stay here as long as you need, he finally said. The spare room's yours. No rent, no conditions. Just promise me you'll finish college and make something of yourself. Best revenge is living well. I promised. That spare room became my launching pad. I worked full-time at the hardware store, went to classes, and spent every spare moment learning about real estate investment. Arthur, it turned out, had dabbled in property renovation decades ago. He taught me everything he knew about finding undervalued properties, doing budget renovations, and maximizing rental income. The college fund he'd been secretly building for me turned out to be $8,000, enough to cover a year's tuition if I stayed local and kept working. I finished my degree in 3 years instead of 4 by taking summer classes and maxing out my credit hours each semester. Meanwhile, my family fell apart without me there to be the scapegoat. The dismissal letter from Olivia's college arrived 2 weeks after I left. Evelyn called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that progressed from angry to desperate to guilt-tripping. Liam, your sister needs you right now. This is a family crisis. How can you abandon us like this? We need to present a united front. Call me back immediately. I deleted every message without listening to them fully. Through Arthur, who maintained sparse contact with Robert, I learned what was happening. The $40,000 tuition bill was due. Olivia's mental health crisis defense didn't hold up when the registrar explained she'd failed every single class from sheer lack of attendance. Evelyn was furious. Robert was resigned. Olivia was playing the victim harder than ever, somehow making her academic failure about the family not supporting her emotional needs enough. Without me there as the buffer, the responsible one who made everyone else's dysfunction look less bad by comparison, they had to actually look at each other. Apparently, they didn't like what they saw. I graduated college at 24 with a degree in business administration and exactly 0 family members in attendance. Arthur came, bringing a small cake and a card with a check for $1,000. Investment capital, he called it. Go make your first deal. That summer, I found a foreclosed property through a bank auction listing. A 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood that had been sitting empty for 8 months. The grass was waist-high. The paint was peeling. And the interior looked like it had been abandoned mid-renovation by someone who'd run out of money and hope. Perfect. The bank was listing it at $52,000, but I could tell they were desperate. Properties in this condition scared off most buyers who wanted move-in-ready homes. I spent a week researching comparable sales, calculating repair costs, and building a detailed renovation budget. Offered $47,000, expecting them to counter. They accepted $45,000 within 24 hours. I used Arthur's $1,000 investment plus every penny I'd saved from 3 years of working at the hardware store as a down payment. Got a small business loan for the rest with the property itself as collateral. The bank officer looked skeptical when I walked in with my renovation plans and budget spreadsheets, but the numbers were solid. He approved it. The next 6 months were brutal. I'd work my regular job during the day, then head to the property and work until midnight or later. I ripped out the disgusting carpet, found beautiful oak hardwood underneath that just needed refinishing, patched and painted every surface, replaced outdated light fixtures with modern alternatives from the hardware store where I got my employee discount, landscaped the yard myself, spending weekends pulling weeds and planting shrubs. I learned plumbing by watching YouTube videos and calling in favors from contractors I'd met through the hardware store. Figured out basic electrical work the same way. I made mistakes, plenty of them, but learned from each one. The first faucet I installed leaked for 3 days before I figured out I'd forgotten a washer. The first light switch I wired was backward. But by the end, I could handle most basic home repairs competently. I also learned about permits, inspections, and the million small details that separate amateur landlords from professional property managers. Discovered that the city required specific permits for certain electrical work. Found out that rental properties needed specific safety features, like hardwired smoke detectors. Every regulation felt like an obstacle designed to stop people like me. But I treated each one as a lesson in how to do things right. When I finished, the place looked completely transformed. Fresh paint, updated fixtures, refinished floors, landscaped yard. I had it professionally appraised, and it came back at $89,000. I'd essentially created $44,000 in equity through 6 months of sweat and about $15,000 in materials and permits. Listed it for rent at $1,200 per month. Got 14 applications in the first week. Selected a young couple, both teachers, stable income, excellent references, no red flags. The rent covered my mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance fund with about $200 left over each month. That surplus went straight into savings for the next property. But more importantly, I'd proved I could do this. That first property wasn't just about money. It was about demonstrating that I could take something broken and make it valuable. That I could build something real with my own hands and intelligence. The second property came 8 months later. Another foreclosure. This one a duplex. Same process. Research, calculate, renovate, rent. This time, the work went faster because I knew what I was doing. By the end of that renovation, I could tile a bathroom, install a toilet, wire a ceiling fan, and patch drywall better than half the contractors I'd met. The third property was a small single-family home that needed major work. The previous owner had started gutting the kitchen, then apparently just gave up. I spent 3 months finishing what they'd started, learning cabinet installation and countertop work along the way. Each property taught me something new. Each renovation made me more competent. Each successful rental proved I could do this professionally. By 26, I owned 3 rental properties. By 28, I had 7. By 30, I was running a small real estate investment company with 15 properties, generating consistent monthly income. I'd built something real from nothing, using the same stubbornness my family used to hate about me. During those years, my family made sporadic attempts to contact me. Evelyn would call on holidays, leaving messages about healing family wounds and letting go of past hurt. Olivia found me on social media, sending messages about how much she'd grown and how sorry she was. I ignored all of it. Not out of spite, exactly, but because I genuinely had nothing to say to them. They belonged to a life I'd left behind. I'd moved so far past that version of myself that engaging with them felt like trying to have a conversation with strangers about someone else's problems. Then, Arthur got sick. Cancer. Stage 3 when they found it. He was 72 and stubborn as hell, insisting on minimal treatment so he could die on his own terms instead of wasting away in some hospital. I moved back into his house to take care of him during those final months. That's when my family made their move. Evelyn showed up at Arthur's house one afternoon while I was at work. She'd found out through some distant cousin that Arthur was dying. Probably figured this was her chance to reconnect while I was vulnerable. Arthur, bless him, met her at the door and didn't let her inside. "Evelyn," he said, his voice cold. "You've got some nerve showing up here after what you did to that boy." "I'm his mother," she replied, trying to sound hurt. "I have a right to see my son." "You gave up that right when you chose your daughter's fantasy over your son's reality. Liam doesn't want to see you. Now get off my property before I call the police." She left, but not before leaving a letter. Arthur gave it to me that evening. I almost threw it away unread, but something made me open it. The letter was a masterpiece of manipulation. 3 pages of how she'd always loved both children equally, how she'd been doing her best in difficult circumstances, how Olivia had really changed and was now working hard to become independent. No actual apology, just explanations and justifications wrapped in victim language. The kicker was the last paragraph. We're having financial difficulties right now. Your father's overtime got cut, and Olivia's been struggling to find stable employment. We could really use your help. I know you've been doing well in real estate. Maybe you could give us some advice or help with a loan. Family helps family, Liam. That's what we do. There it was. The real reason for the sudden interest in reconciliation. They needed money. I showed the letter to Arthur. He read it, then handed it back with a disgusted shake of his head. They haven't changed at all, he said. Still using people. Still refusing to take responsibility. Still expecting you to fix their problems. I know, I said. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. Absolutely nothing. Arthur smiled. That's my boy. He passed away 3 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep. He left me everything. The house, his savings, his old truck. The will included a note. Liam, you are the grandson I was proud to claim, and the son my boy never learned to be. Use this foundation to build something beautiful. Don't let them pull you back down. The funeral was small. Me, a few of Arthur's old friends. Robert, Evelyn, and Olivia didn't come. They weren't invited. Robert looked terrible. Older than ever, hollow-eyed. He approached me after the service. I'm sorry, he said. About everything. About being too weak to stand up to your mother. About letting Olivia manipulate all of us. About not being the father you deserved. I studied him for a long moment. The anger I'd expected to feel wasn't there. Just a sort of detached pity for this man who'd wasted years of his life enabling dysfunction. You can't fix the past, Robert, I told him. But you can stop repeating it in the future. I'm getting divorced, he said suddenly. Filed papers last week. I should have done it years ago, but I kept thinking things would get better. They never did. Good, I said. Maybe now you can figure out who you actually are instead of who Evelyn wanted you to be. We didn't hug or have some tearful reconciliation. Just nodded at each other like business acquaintances and went our separate ways. But something had shifted. Robert was finally making a choice instead of just accepting whatever happened to him. Inheriting Arthur's house gave me the capital I needed to expand the business. I sold the property for $180,000 and used the proceeds to buy a small apartment complex, 8 units that needed significant work but had solid bones. I spent a year renovating, then filled them with quality tenants at market rates. The business grew. By 32, I was managing 43 properties across 3 counties. By 35, I'd expanded into commercial real estate, small office buildings, retail strips, even a small warehouse complex. Each acquisition was carefully researched, conservatively financed, and managed with the same attention to detail I'd learned from that first foreclosure. The key was treating tenants like people instead of revenue sources. I responded to maintenance requests within 24 hours, kept properties in excellent condition, charged fair market rates instead of squeezing every possible dollar, built a reputation as a landlord people actually wanted to rent from. Word spread. My vacancy rates were consistently below 5% when the market average was 12 to 15%. I also started mentoring other young investors, people who reminded me of myself at 24. Hungry, determined, but without the knowledge or connections to get started. I'd meet them for coffee, review their business plans, sometimes even partner with them on their first deals. Watching someone succeed using the principles Arthur taught me felt like honoring his legacy in the most meaningful way possible. The investment company itself became profitable beyond just rental income. I'd find distressed properties, renovate them efficiently, then either hold them for rental income or sell them to other investors at market rates. The company developed a reputation for taking on challenging projects that others avoided. Weird layouts, code violations, difficult locations. I'd figured out that problems others saw as deal breakers were actually opportunities if you knew how to solve them systematically. Revenue hit 7 figures annually when I was 33. Not bad for someone who'd left home at 23 with $500 and a duffel bag. Somewhere along the way, I'd become legitimately wealthy. Not private jet rich, but comfortable in a way my parents never were, despite their constant striving to appear successful. The difference was I'd built something real, while they'd been maintaining appearances on credit cards and overtime. I also met Sophia. She was a real estate attorney handling the closing on one of my commercial properties, a small office building I was converting to mixed-use retail space. The previous owner had gotten tangled up in code violations and was selling at a loss just to escape the headache. I saw potential where they saw problems. Sophia walked into our first meeting wearing a sharp suit and carrying a briefcase that looked like it weighed more than she did. She was direct, efficient, with exactly zero patience for nonsense. Within 5 minutes, she'd identified 3 potential issues with the title that the previous attorney had missed. Within 10 minutes, she'd outlined solutions for all 3. "You actually read this whole contract?" I asked, impressed. "Most attorneys just skim the standard stuff." "That's literally my job," she replied without looking up from her notes. "You'd be surprised how many people pay me to do things they could do themselves if they just read the documents." We ended up grabbing coffee after the closing. She suggested it, said she liked working with investors who actually understood what they were buying instead of just chasing money. We talked for 2 hours about real estate market trends and property law. She'd grown up in a trailer park, put herself through law school working 3 jobs, and had exactly zero patience for people who made excuses instead of making progress. "My mom always said I should find a nice, stable man to take care of me," Sophia mentioned during one of our early dates. She meant it as advice. I took it as a warning about what not to do. We clicked immediately. 2 people who'd both built themselves from nothing and understood that success wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about building something real that couldn't be taken away. She also understood family dysfunction in ways most people couldn't. Her father had been an addict who drained the family's savings multiple times before disappearing when she was 12. Her mother had spent years making excuses for him, choosing loyalty to a destructive man over protection of her kids. Sophia had learned early, same as me, that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are actually the ones holding you back. "You know what I love about real estate?" she said one evening, reviewing contracts at my kitchen table. "Buildings don't lie. They don't manipulate. They don't make excuses. Either the foundation is solid or it isn't. Either the structure is sound or it isn't. Everything is measurable, fixable, improvable. Wish people worked the same way." We dated for a year before I proposed. Nothing fancy. Just the 2 of us at the first property I'd ever renovated, standing in the living room where I'd spent 6 months learning how to build something from broken pieces. I told her that was exactly what she'd helped me do with my life. Take someone broken and help them become whole without trying to change who they fundamentally were. She said yes before I finished the question. We got married 2 years later at a small venue that held exactly 50 people. Small ceremony, close friends only. No family drama, no performance, no pretense. Just 2 people who understood each other, committing to building something together. Robert came, which surprised me. He'd fully divorced Evelyn by then and was dating someone named Diane, who actually treated him like an equal. He looked healthier than I'd seen him in years, like decades of weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "I'm proud of you," he told me at the reception. "Arthur would be too." "Thanks. I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he continued, "but I want you to know I'm trying to be better, to do better." "I can see that," I said, and I meant it. Around this time, I got an unexpected message on social media from Olivia. Unlike the previous attempts at contact, this one was different. No excuses, no manipulation, just a straightforward message. "Liam, I know I don't deserve a response, but I wanted you to know I've been working on myself. Got a job at a restaurant, been there 2 years now, started as a hostess, worked up to shift manager. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and I'm proud of it. I'm sorry for everything. You don't have to forgive me or even respond. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what you've known all along. That real worth comes from what you build, not what you're given." I didn't respond immediately. I showed it to Sophia, who read it carefully. What do you think? She asked. I think people can change, I said. But I also think time will tell if it's real or just another performance. Fair. 6 months later, Olivia messaged again, this time with photos of her working at the restaurant, a simple apartment she'd rented on her own, a small savings account she'd built up. No requests, no manipulation, just evidence of a life she was building without anyone's help. I responded with a single line. Proud of you for doing the work. Her reply came hours later. Thank you. That means more than you know. We didn't become close. Didn't have tearful reunions or pretend the past didn't matter. But we established a distant respect. Two people who shared DNA and trauma, acknowledging each other's existence without demanding anything. As for Evelyn, I heard through the family grapevine that she was living in a small apartment after the divorce, working as a receptionist, still telling anyone who'd listen about her ungrateful children who'd abandoned her. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that she'd ended up doing the same type of work Olivia had started with, except Olivia had used it as a foundation to grow, while Evelyn used it as proof of victimhood. Last year, I decided to honor Arthur's memory by opening a community center in the neighborhood where he'd lived his entire adult life. The building was a former warehouse that had been sitting empty for 3 years. The owner had died. Heirs couldn't agree on what to do with it. Eventually sold it just to stop paying taxes on vacant property. I bought it for $180,000, then spent another $400,000 on renovations. The space was massive, 12,000 square feet of potential. We gutted it completely, bringing it up to modern building codes while preserving the original exposed brick and timber beams that gave it character. We created a computer lab with 20 workstations running current software. Built 4 private tutoring rooms where kids could get one-on-one help with homework. Designed a large multi-purpose room that could host everything from job training workshops to community meetings. Added a commercial kitchen and small restaurant space where people could get affordable meals. Nothing fancy, just good food at prices that wouldn't break someone's budget. The restaurant was Sophia's idea. She'd pointed out that lots of families in that neighborhood were food insecure, but free meals came with stigma. Charging $1 for a plate of food lets people maintain dignity while still getting help. Smart woman, my wife. I spent 8 months on the renovation, managing contractors, and doing much of the work myself when I could. The building transformed from an abandoned eyesore into something the neighborhood could be proud of. I named it the Arthur Foundation, after the man who taught me that success meant building ladders for others to climb, not pulling them up behind you. At the grand opening ceremony, over 200 people showed up, local families, business owners, city council members who'd helped fast-track our permits. The computer lab was already booked solid for the next month. 3 local teachers had volunteered to run free tutoring sessions. The restaurant had applications from 5 people wanting to work there, all from the neighborhood. Robert came with Diane. Olivia came with her boyfriend and their baby son, Noah. She'd named him after Arthur's middle name. Sophia's family filled the room. Friends from over the years, business associates, people from the neighborhood who'd watched the renovation happen. I stood at the front of the room, looking out at faces that actually cared, and realized something profound. I'd built this. Not just the building, not just the business, not just the wealth. I'd built a life, surrounded by people who chose to be there, who showed up, who gave without expecting anything back. During my speech, I talked about Arthur and what he taught me about resilience, self-respect, and the difference between family you're born into and family you choose. Arthur once told me that the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. I said, my voice resonating in the revitalized space. It's proving yourself right. He showed me that when people try to make you small, you don't shrink to fit their expectations. You grow until you outgrow them completely. The room was silent, people actually listening, hanging on every word. Some people will try to dim your light because it makes their darkness visible. They'll try to convince you that you're nothing because your something threatens their everything. But when you choose yourself, when you refuse to shrink for someone else's comfort, you don't just save yourself. You show others that they can choose themselves, too. I looked at Robert, who had tears in his eyes. At Olivia, who was holding Noah and nodding. At Sophia, who understood better than anyone what it took to build something real from broken pieces. Arthur chose to reach out to an invisible kid. Robert chose divorce over continuing the lie. Olivia chose work over manipulation. And I chose to leave a house that was never a home, to build something real. That's what this foundation represents. The idea that it's never too late to choose differently. The applause filled the room, but I wasn't quite finished. I want to end with this, I said, my voice cutting through the fading claps. The real gift Evelyn gave me, without meaning to, was showing me exactly what not to be. By denying me birthday celebrations, she taught me to celebrate myself every single day. By telling me I was nothing, she motivated me to become something. By erasing me from family photos, she freed me to paint my own portrait. Robert stood up, something he never would have done years ago. "That's my son," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's my boy in every way that matters." The party continued late into the night. Olivia left early to put Noah to bed, but not before hugging me. A real hug, without agenda or manipulation. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me it was possible to change." "You did that yourself," I told her. "I just stopped enabling the alternative." Robert stayed until the end, helping clean up like a volunteer rather than expecting to be served. As we stacked chairs together, he said something that stayed with me. "I wasted 20 years being afraid of your mother's anger, afraid of making waves, afraid of standing up for what was right. The funny part is, once I finally did it, I realized the only thing I should have been afraid of was wasting more time being afraid." "Better late than never," I said. "Still," he replied, looking at the empty room that would soon be filled with kids learning and growing. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough when it counted, when you needed me to be." "We can't change the past," I told him. "But you're here now. That counts for something." As Sophia and I locked up that night, she took my hand and said something I'll never forget. "You know what the best revenge really is? It's not success or money or even happiness. It's indifference. Evelyn is out there somewhere, still angry, still bitter, still blaming everyone else. But you've moved so far past her that she's not even a footnote in your story anymore. She's just a catalyst that started a reaction she couldn't control." She was right. I rarely thought about Evelyn anymore. When I did, it was with the kind of detached curiosity you might have about a stranger's problems. Her hold over me had dissolved completely, replaced by the solid foundation of real relationships and earned success. Looking back now, getting banned from my own birthday was the greatest gift my toxic family ever gave me. It forced me to stop waiting for them to celebrate my existence and start celebrating it myself. It taught me that you can't earn love from people who see your success as their failure. And most importantly, it showed me that sometimes the best way to honor where you came from is to become everything they tried to prevent you from being. I'm 37 now. Sophia and I have 2 kids who are growing up in a house where birthdays are celebrated, achievements are recognized, and love isn't conditional on being better than someone else. Olivia brings Noah over for Sunday dinners, where he plays with his cousins and learns that family gatherings can be about joy rather than judgment. Robert is an active grandfather, the kind he never got to be before. He still apologizes sometimes for the lost years, but I tell him the same thing every time. We can't change the past, but we can choose the future. As for Evelyn, I heard through distant relatives that she's still at that receptionist job, still telling anyone who will listen about her ungrateful children who abandoned her. The difference between her and Olivia is stark. Olivia chose growth, while Evelyn chose victimhood.
And I
chose to build. What would you have done if your family had tried to erase you like that? Would you have stayed and fought? Or would you have walked away and built your own legacy? Let me know in the comments below.